It is finished. The 2024 Virginia Legislative General Assembly session is done. Special session, and the last day for the governor to take actions on any bills passed by the General Assembly is over. The last bill has signed into law, and the last veto has been executed. What does this mean for the Commonwealth of Virginia? What's in and what's out, and what's actually good in the budget for you in the Commonwealth? It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. Thank you for joining us on this Memorial Day weekend as we take a look forward at this past year's 2024 General Assembly and what laws affect you. Welcome back. It's Stay the Water. I'm your host, Dr. Eric Claville. As always, we'd like to thank you for joining us on this very, very special day. It is Memorial Day weekend. Of course, we celebrate Memorial Day officially on tomorrow, on Monday. But of course, everyone is celebrating this weekend and traveling and so forth. You know, it's a great time always that you join us here on Stay the Water as we broadcast from the campus of the Norfolk State University, home of the Spartan Nation, from none other than WNSB Hot 91, the soul of VA. You know, we had a phenomenal year in 2024 so far, our academic year 2023-2024, and also a great year in policy and politics. And you've been with us from the very beginning, from January all the way up to now, as we covered the General Assembly, looking back and looking forward. We've had many, many stakeholders and individuals talking about their priorities and what's at stake, how to get involved, and what they're doing to fight for you. We also took a look at the different bills and budgets and things of that nature and what was happening and kept you abreast. And you stayed there right there with us as we broke it down to find out what it all means for you. Well, this is the final show for this legislative session. And we're going to take a quick look and kind of do a recap and look at what it really means. Look at what was passed. Not only that, but also what was vetoed and what can we expect in the budget for you, the citizens of the Commonwealth. But before I go forward, again, I'd like to recognize all of those that served in our military. Once again, this is a very special day, special weekend. It's Memorial Day weekend. Memorial Day is, of course, on Monday, on tomorrow. And Memorial Day itself is a time period here in the United States where we honor and mourn the U.S. military personnel who died while serving in the United States Armed Forces. Now, we know that our military is the greatest military in the world. We also know that our veterans and those who are serving currently in the military, it's an all-volunteer force. And these individuals put their lives on the line for us, the citizens of this great country, to defend, to uphold, to ensure that our freedoms are intact across the board. And we make sure here that we honor them. We make sure that we actually say thank you for all that you've done, but especially on this day and this weekend, we honor the greatest sacrifice that those have made, and that's the sacrifice of their lives for the sake of freedom. Myself, as a veteran of the U.S. Army National Guard, also my father is a veteran who's passed away, and his father, my grandfather, and all of my uncles, cousins, and friends, and those that have served in the military, and all of those that are here in Hampton Roads. You know, Hampton Roads is a great place for the military. It's a great military tradition here in this city, in this area, and it will continue to be a great tradition here in this great, great place of Hampton Roads, Virginia, home of the largest naval base in the world and home of some of the greatest people in the world as well. So once again, I wanted to make sure I took that opportunity, as we always do, at this time of the year, to honor those that have given the greatest sacrifice. And thank you for your service. Thank you for your families. And thank you for your time. Well, once again, we know that this is a part of the year where I cover on this show. I have the great opportunity to do so. What's going on and what's happening in Virginia politics. In Virginia politics is some of the greatest politics in the world because I believe, Virginia, of course, we have an important election every single year. And it's one of those states, it's one of those places where, you are and you can be involved. If, it's a place where there's a lot of opportunity to get involved in the public policy of our state, of our city. And it's a place where I believe that a lot of us, our voices are heard and also valued. Not only that, but it's also a place where our elected officials are highly, let me tell you, they are highly engaged. I say this all the time. Our U.S. Congressman, my Congressman, Congressman Bobby Scott, you'll see him every single where, whether it's at a local event, a church event, or a major national event. He's always there, representing and showing the community that he is there for them. Not only that, but when we have our governors, our lieutenant governors, attorney generals, state senators, state delegates, these individuals are here. They're here wanting to hear your voice, holding town halls at events, not just showing up, but being supporters of those things, being supporters of the communities that they represent. And to me, that is the value of our Commonwealth. That is the value that I believe that is unsurpassed by any other state in our union. And that's why I believe that Virginia is the way that Virginia goes, so does the rest of the country. So let's take a few moments to look back and then look forward at what we've done during this time of the General Assembly. For those of you that not only pay attention to this show, but also on our various local news networks, you know that I have the very blessed opportunity and very fortunate to be an analyst and a commentator, and for all things politics and public policy in this area. And one thing that I noted, not only on this show, but also all areas that I was able to give analysis during the election, is that Hampton Roads is the center of political power. We had the historic election, of course, of the first African-American Speaker of the House and also the first African-American female to hold the seat of the chair for the Senate and Finance Committee. And not only that, but we also had the historic election of the largest number of African Americans elected to the General Assembly. And not just that, but we also had the election to where the Democrats retook the House and kept the Senate. With all of that in play, we saw where the Democrats themselves created a plan for the people. Of course, we had the governor's office, Governor Glenn Youngkin. He campaigned on a backwards budget, and the Democrats campaigned on Families First for Virginia. And they came together in a deal. Of course, no one gets everything that they want. That's politics. And, it's unfortunate that we live in an era, of course, on a national scale, where we find where individuals are majorly polarized. It's unfortunate that we find that there are individuals that want to create wedges between what is real and what is not, and by using that against the people. But what we do find here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, that ultimately, we find that camaraderie and negotiation wins out. And that's a good thing for the Commonwealth. It's a good thing for you, the people. So with that being the case, during this past session and during this time on Stay the Water, I had the ability and I was very fortunate to have many guests on to talk about exactly what this session is going to be like, what this session is for. Kicking it off was our good friend, my good friend, a friend to this institution, and also great alum, Delegate Cliff Hayes Jr., who talked about, exactly what we're looking forward for, what we're looking for in this particular session. Also, how the support for HBCUs was going to be there, and it was. We also had Delegate Benita Anthony, who's a first-time delegate, who represents this area for Norfolk State, that talked about the impact of legislation and impacting us here in the Commonwealth, and more specifically in Norfolk. We also had, on the Senate side, Senator Angela Williams Graves, Senator Aaron Rouse, Delegate Michael Fagans, also NSU alum, Delegate Candy King, Delegate NSU alum, Delegate Lamont Bagby, who is the chair of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus. I'm sorry, Senator Lamont Bagby, who's now Senator, who is the chair of the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, who is also an NSU alum and great supporter of all that we do here. We also had the House Speaker, Speaker Don Scott, on this show. Not only on the show, but also a speaker for commencement that not only inspired the students, but also show that you can do anything that you want, that you put your mind to. No matter what setback, it's always a setup that God has for you to do great things. And not only that, but we also had our other delegates, Delegate Nadarius Clark, and other individuals across the board that came on this show to talk about the things that they're doing in the Commonwealth. Think about that. Our Hampton Roads delegation and those in Richmond and across the state showed up here on this show to talk about what they're doing for you, the people of the Commonwealth. That's the value that we add here in Norfolk State. That's the value of State of the Water. That's the value that we have here in Hampton Roads. Again, a phenomenal place to be here, especially in this time and place. So that was during the General Assembly itself. And we found that the General Assembly, it ended on time. It was a bipartisan budget that was passed, and everyone expected kind of chaos. It's like, well, what was going to take place? What happened here in the election? What was going to happen when we had all this new leadership, all these new freshmen, this major turnover in the General Assembly? 1/3 of the General Assembly turned over, either by individuals deciding to retire or not run for re-election. What was going to happen? And this was all due to redistricting. What was going to take place? Was it going to be chaos? Well, instead of chaos, we had a lot of commonality on a lot of major issues impacting the Commonwealth of Virginia. Commonality on issues impacting the Commonwealth of Virginia. Once again, that's the value that we see. That's why I believe that Virginia is unsurpassed in how we deal with politics and policy impacting you, the citizens of this great state. So once, it was passed, of course, the governor introduced his budget. I'll go back in December. Every December, the governor introduces his budget to the Commonwealth of Virginia. And then from there, the General Assembly then goes into the session and pass laws and close their session out. And it goes to the governor. So the governor the budget went to his desk and all the bills, and this particular governor had the highest amount of vetoes in the history of the Commonwealth. The highest amount of vetoes in the history of the Commonwealth. Now, that was to be expected. But once again, when you have power in the General Assembly in one party and power in the Executive House in another party, that's the check and balance. That's the value of our great system. But not only that, but a budget that was passed bipartisan vote went to the governor's desk, and 233 amendments, budget amendments, were put forth. 233 budget amendments. Well, some people say he should have just vetoed the whole budget, but instead he decided to create budget amendments, which were basically changes to the budget that was passed based upon what the governor submitted in his introduced budget. So now we fast forward and we had a special session. And in that special session, everyone, leading up to the special session, you had these two competing tours. You had the governor saying one thing, it was a backwards budget. You had the General Assembly saying one thing, that this was families first for Virginia. And who was going to be in the right? Who was going to be in the wrong? What was this going to do and mean for you, the people of the Commonwealth? Once again, everyone expected chaos, absolute chaos. But instead of chaos, we had commonality across issues impacting you in the Commonwealth. That's the energy value. That is the value of our Virginia Commonwealth. So with that being the case, the special session ended without a lot of fireworks. A budget was signed and put into effect. And also on last Friday, the governor had his opportunity to take action, the last action possible on any bills, either to let them go into law or to veto them. And that's exactly what he did. So where are we now? What laws are going to impact us moving forward? come July 1st. And what did the governor actually do before the end of his last opportunity to impact the Commonwealth with his vetoes on the General Assembly bills? So let's take a look and see what are some of the things that's in the budget that's going to impact you, and what did the governor actually do to the laws that were passed. So according to the Virginia Mercury, there were 5 things that we believe that you should know about the newly released budget deal that the legislators and the governor agreed upon. Number 1, let's take a look at the digital sales tax increase. Well, the digital sales tax increase has repeatedly, according to Virginia Mercury, the governor said he won't sign a budget that raises taxes. And now, let's see, he won't have to. So keep in mind, the digital sales tax increase is actually out. Now, what exactly is that? It is a sales tax on digital purchases like streaming subscriptions, music downloads, software, and so forth. So, for example, when you go to an app and you download music from whatever music source that you have, there's a cost that comes with that. Or you making any digital purchases, there's a cost that comes with that. Well, the Commonwealth of Virginia is one of the few states that don't charge a tax for that. So now what ends up happening is that money is not, that stream of income is not coming into the Commonwealth of Virginia. As a matter of fact, the new budget deal envisions a wider look at Virginia's tax policy, according to the Virginia Mercury, by a joint legislative subcommittee that will study the digital sales tax and other issues for potential action in the 2025 General Assembly. Now, how much of revenue are we looking at? Lawmakers are foregoing, according to the Virginia Mercury, get this, roughly $1 billion in new revenue the digital sales tax was projected to generate over 2 years. That's over $1 billion. Okay? That's a lot of money. That's a lot of revenue. And that's a lot that's being left on the table until 2025. So we're going to stay locked into this particular issue because it's going to be a major issue for us moving forward. Also, a major new stream of income and revenue for our Commonwealth. Several other issues that's in the budget deal that was struck that will impact you. Number 1, the Democratic spending priorities are still in. Teachers are still getting their pay raises. The budget won't be linked to the regional greenhouse gas initiative. And also, there was no budget do-over for the skills game. So let's take a look at a few of these in depth before we take a look at the last final laws that the governor took action on before the General Assembly ended. So Democratic spending priorities are still in. According to the Virginia Mercury, the House budget presentation says that the budget retains all spending items from the conference report, including increases for K-12 schools and higher education. Now, Democrats had proposed major increase in what's known as at-risk add-on funding, or extra money that the state gives to school divisions with high number of economically disadvantaged students. Now, the Democrats clearly didn't get everything that they wanted out of the 2024 session, according to the Virginia Mercury. As Governor Youngkin, as we said before, he had the highest amount of vetoes of bills. And how many were that? He vetoed more than 150 bills. And several of them were high-profile Democratic priorities like legalizing retail sales of marijuana for recreational use and raising the state's minimum wage to $15 per hour by 2026. Again, raising the minimum wage was vetoed by the governor. However, some of those vetoes freed up money in the budget tied to bills that won't become law. So, because raising the minimum wage, according to Virginia Mercury, would have come with extra costs to the state, Youngkin's veto of that bill saved $80 million that could be used to balance the overall budget. So there's a give and take with this, but at the end of the day, the veto for the increase in minimum wage, we believe that the people of the Commonwealth are going to suffer the most. But if you look at the federal law and you look at competition, you can't go anywhere without making at least $15 an hour at various convenience stores. They're starting out at $15 an hour. Now, I remember minimum wage at $4.25. That was what I started out with, $4.25. And we're talking 30 years ago. However, prices increase, we have inflation, and now we're talking $15. So 3 times what I started out making, 4 times really, is what now it costs to make it per hour here in our country. So once again, the Democrats' priorities are still in, did not get everything that they wanted, but that's politics, right? That's politics. But we got quite a bit, especially K through 12, especially students, and funding for our schools, which is very important. I want to delve a little bit into the teachers' pay raises, speaking of schools. So the teachers' pay raises are still in, according to the Virginia Mercury. The new budget deal includes state funding to pay for 3% raises for teachers and school support personnel in both years of the budget. Now, the governor, he proposed more modest pay increases for teachers in his original budget proposal last year, but he came around to supporting 3% in both years in the revised budget. And the Democrats, according to Virginia Mercury, prioritized raising teacher pay to the national average or better. But the governor administration has stressed that educators' pay has already gone up during his administration. So pay went up 3%. We know, of course, by various reports that we're still not up to the national average or better, but we're getting there. But the key is the Democratic-led General Assembly was higher than the governor's recommendation, his original budget. So a compromise came to 3%. Again, making sure that the greatest impact are for you, the people of the Commonwealth, as opposed to benefiting businesses and that are going to simply use it for their own pay raises and their own gain. But if we put more money back in your pockets, it's more money to take care of your families, more money for you to do the things that you love to do. And that is live here in the Commonwealth and do great things here. So let's take a look at a couple other things that's in the budget, in this last budget deal that were really high profile. And then we're going to take a look at some bills that were actually vetoed. Now, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a multi-state program meant to reduce planet warming carbon emissions, the governor the Democrat lawmakers issued an executive order aiming to, was angered. He angered many Democratic lawmakers by issuing an executive order to end Virginia's participation. Democrats questioned it, according to Virginia Mercury, and whether the governor had the authority to remove the state from a program. And the legislature voted to enter, and they insisted on their stance by including the language in the budget. So with that, the litigation, there's going to be litigation over Youngkin's move, which is currently pending in Floyd County Circuit Court. And the issue now appears more likely to be settled there or through Virginia's 2025 election. Now, with this, the program requires electricity producers to purchase allowances for carbon they emit, and some money raised from those purchases returned to Virginia, used for flood resiliency and energy efforts. But the governor has criticized this as a backdoor tax on Virginians because it allows companies to recoup the cost through customer energy bills. Now, there's been controversy over greenhouse gases and the impact that it has on our community, and how do we recoup the costs for this. And part of that initiative was the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. However, we know that climate change is real. Flooding takes place all the time. And unfortunately, it impacts us in the Commonwealth and here in Hampton Roads a lot. I mean, let us have a hard rain for about 5 minutes, and brother, it's going to be hard to pass certain streets. You got to wait for the water to recede. Well, that's only going to get worse with sea level rise. So we got to find a way to make sure that we are getting the best result out of what our companies are emitting, and how do we repel that and help us to live where we have the least amount of impact. So continue to see that. And that's in litigation. We're going to monitor that and see where it goes. But again, we have to do something with that. But now it's currently in a stalemate. And the skills games. Convenience store, truck stops, and restaurant owners across the state, according to Virginia Mercury, have been closely watching whether the state will repeal its ban on slot machine lookalikes known as skill games. Well, if that's going to happen, it's not happening through the budget. Instead, the budget scraps nearly $94 million in skill game revenue anticipated for fiscal year 2025, which is an indication the machines are unlikely to be reactivated by July 1st, as the businesses owners actually wanted. So the new budget retains several provisions anticipating regulatory costs for legal skill games, a sign that there's still a chance for machines to be legalized later. But with no action on skill games in the budget, the governor can either sign or veto the original bill he tried to overhaul. Now, if the legislation was vetoed, the skill game proponents could only continue their fight via new legislation that could take up this later in the 2025 session. So where is this? What did the governor actually do? And what bills were vetoed by the governor? Again, according to the Virginia Mercury, the governor actually vetoed bills on contraceptive access, skill games, and Confederate heritage rollbacks. Let's take a look at the skill games. As expected, Governor Youngkin vetoed a high-profile bill that would tax and regulate skill games in Virginia, which is a setback for gambling interests and business owners that lobbied to have the machines turned back on in convenience stores, truck stops, and restaurants across the state. Now, skill game supporters, according to the Virginia Mercury, are hoping a new bill could emerge from the remains of the one Youngkin killed, but it's unclear when and how that might happen. So the legislation vetoed by the governor was one of the most intensive efforts to date to convince Virginia to officially sanction machines that have evaded gambling taxes and regulation for most of their existence here in the state. And we know, according to Virginia Mercury, a ban on the machines that took effect in 2021, but suspended for nearly 2 years as skill game backers fought the ban in court. So the Supreme Court of Virginia reinstated the ban last fall, leading to this urgent push for skill games lobby to change the law and get rid of that ban. However, we know that that's going to not be the case, as the governor proposed a higher tax rate, stricter regulations, and sweeping geographic limitations on skill games meant to stop machines from cannibalizing revenue from Virginia's casinos and Rosie's gambling facilities tied to horse racing. So they got to come back. They got to come back in 2025 and see what takes place for skill games. But another big bill, another big issue that the governor himself vetoed, and that's contraceptive access, or access to contraceptives. Now, Governor Youngkin, he vetoed the right to contraceptive legislation, which was supported by Senator Hashmi, a Democrat and out of Richmond, and Delegate Price out of Newport News. The lawmakers say that their proposal is relevant because of the shifting national landscape surrounding reproductive health care laws and how some states are targeting birth control access. According to Senator Hashmi, it says the veto came after Youngkin had previously sought amendments to the bill that Hashmi said gutted it. Now, the version of the bill passed the legislature saying that healthcare providers have a right to prescribe contraceptives and that people have a right to obtain them, and it offers definitions of forms of contraceptives and outlines the legal actions. However, Youngkin wrote that the bill would create an overly broad cause of action against political subdivisions and parents, as well as medical professionals. Now, with this, various legislators said that they'll continue to fight for this, saying it's too important for families and the like. And of course, we know that this comes in light of the overturned federal abortion protection in 2022 by the U.S. Supreme Court, which basically left it up to the states for contraceptive and access to these medical procedures. But we know that this is going to be a major fight across the board, especially in this upcoming election, 2024, 2025. Look for legislators, look for those running for governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general to run on that issue. It's not going anywhere. It's a major issue here in the Commonwealth and across the country. Now, lastly, the General Assembly rejected Youngkin's amendment bill to repeal state-issued special license plates honoring sons of Confederate veterans, and General Robert E. Lee, the governor, ultimately vetoed the legislation on Friday. So the Confederacy-related license plates, sales tax, plates, and tax breaks, they remain there. So Youngkin proposed lawmakers return next year to vote on the legislation and have the state analyze the effects of the Commonwealth's revenue should the place be discontinued. Well, we know that it's always a fight. It's always a back and forth as it relates to what is important to us in the Commonwealth and what laws actually pass. But one thing about it is that the process always starts again next year. Well, once again, we thank you for joining us from January, from really December to now, the end of May, as we reviewed the 2024 Virginia General Assembly special session and budget. Because here on Stay the Water, we bring movers, shakers, and policymakers to you to discuss issues important to the community. Until next time, enjoy your Memorial Day weekend. Be safe. God bless. And until next year, our 2025 Virginia General Assembly session will keep you abreast. Be good, be great. God bless. We'll see you next week.
Hi, I'm Carrie Washington, and you're listening to State of the Water with award-winning host Dr. Eric Clavel.